Unholy Angle, a theological investigation into the Tilted Cathedral by Dr. Alastair Finch, director of the Center for Anomalous Architecture. Foreword from the editor. The following article details the findings of Dr. Finch's solo expedition to a location whose existence is debated in mainstream geological and theological circles. Dr. Finch was a renowned, if controversial, expert in architectural paradoxes. He was considered missing for 7 months before this manuscript, along with several personal effects, was found in a sealed crate delivered to our offices with no return address. We present it here, unedited, as a testament to his final and most terrifying work. I prologue the cartographer's delirium. It began, as these things often do, with a madman's map. In the rain-slicked alleyways of a city that deserves to remain nameless, I found him, a cartographer of the impossible named Thorn. He was a man whose sanity had been sanded down by years of chasing whispers. He sold me the coordinates for a price that was not monetary, but a promise that I would believe what I saw. They call it the Tilted Cathedral, he whispered, his breath smelling of cheap gin and profound fear. It doesn't break the laws of physics, Doctor. It's simply immensely big. It stands where faith and reality have a fault line. The map was a masterpiece of delirium, a swirling vortex of ink, and what I suspected was dried blood, depicting a forest in the northern reach where no such forest should exist. At its heart, a single structure was drawn, a Gothic cathedral leaning at a preposterous, near-perfect 90-degree
The signs
angle,
are clear. The ritual
as
must
if
be
God
performed
himself
tonight.
had tried to wipe it from the earth and failed.
The signs are clear.
The
ritual
notation
must be
beside
performed
it,
tonight.
in Thorn's spidery script, read, "Gravity is a matter of conviction. I am a man of science, of stone and mortar, of load-bearing walls and the immutable force of gravity." I dismissed it as the ravings of a broken mind. Yet, the image festered in my own. A building that defied not only engineering, but the very bedrock of our physical experience. It was an itch that could only be scratched by seeing it for myself, by proving it a hoax, a mirage, a collective hallucination. So I went. I packed my yacht, my seismograph, my camera, and a healthy dose of academic skepticism. And I journeyed into the northern reach. For 2 weeks, I trekked through a pine forest so dense and silent it felt like walking through a held breath. The air grew cold, then still, then unnervingly heavy. My compass began to spin lazily, refusing to settle on true north. The birdsong ceased. The only sound was the crunch of my own boots and the frantic thumping of my heart, which was beginning to feel less like an organ and more like a malfunctioning metronome. And then I saw it. It was not a gradual revelation. One moment, there was only the endless, vertical line of pine trunks. The next, I broke through the tree line and into a clearing, and my mind simply stuttered. The Tilted Cathedral was real. It was colossal, hewn from a black, volcanic stone that seemed to drink the pallid northern light. Its spires, instead of clawing at the heavens, clawed at the horizon. Its flying buttresses, architectural marvels designed to channel weight downwards, were splayed out like the broken ribs of some fallen leviathan, propping the structure up against an invisible, sideways ground. The entire edifice was canted at that impossible, nausea-inducing angle. It wasn't falling. It was established. It was a permanent, screaming contradiction in stone. But the true horror, the thing that made my scientific mind recoil and my bowels turn to water, was the sight of movement within. Through the vast, stained glass windows that should have been parallel to a non-existent vertical, I saw figures. They moved not with the stumbling gait of someone in a tilting house, with a serene, practiced grace. They walked along walls that were now their floors, their robes flowing downwards, towards a ground that, from my perspective, was a sheer wall. That was when I first heard the music. It was not the solemn, uplifting chorus of a standard mass. It was a groaning, cello-heavy dirge, a Gothic lament that seemed to vibrate through the stone beneath my feet and the air in my lungs. It was the sound of the building itself, a symphony of perpetual, arrested collapse. I had found it, and in doing so, I had begun the process of my own undoing. I eyed the architecture of heresy. My initial approach was one of cautious, analytical terror. I set up my tripod and cameras at the clearing's edge, my hands trembling so violently I could barely operate the shutter. The sheer scale of the place was humbling. It was easily the size of Notre Dame, but its defiance made it feel infinitely larger. The stonework was a study in paradox. The foundation, what little of it was visible, was not buried in the earth at all. Instead, the cathedral met the ground along the length of its southern wall, which was now its de facto base. The stones there were crushed and powdered, as if the immense weight had simply settled over millennia, grinding the bedrock into submission. My seismograph, when I turned it on, emitted a frantic, chattering whine. It wasn't detecting tremors. It was detecting a constant, localized gravitational phenomenon. A persistent, silent scream of warped physics. I focused my long lens on the famous stained glass. From a distance, they depicted the usual biblical scenes: the resurrection, the ascension, the last judgment. But as I adjusted the focus, the details curdled my blood. The glass was not solid. It had a viscous, liquid quality. The colors, deep crimsons, sickly golds, bruised purples, seemed to be in constant, slow motion. The blood from Christ's wounds did not drip. It oozed in thick, syrupy rivulets down the pane, pooling and congealing against the leaded outlines before being slowly, impossibly, drawn back up to the wound to begin its journey anew. The tears of the saints were not clear, but a smoky black, dripping like hot wax, and leaving sluggish, phosphorescent trails. The windows were not static images. They were perpetual, weeping wounds in the fabric of the building. The main entrance, a colossal oaken door banded with iron, was not facing the clearing. It was high above, on what was architecturally the western facade, but which now functioned as the sky-facing wall. A series of rickety-looking wooden scaffolds and rope bridges, like something from a medieval siege, extended from the forest floor up to this door. It was the only way in for those who could not walk the walls. Taking a steadying breath that did little to steady me, I shouldered my pack and began the climb. The scaffolding groaned under my weight, a sound of protest that felt deeply personal. Each step was an act of defiance against every instinct that screamed at me to flee. With every foot of altitude I gained, the Gothic music grew louder. It was no longer just an auditory phenomenon. It was a physical pressure, a thrumming in my teeth and bones. I could make out the deep, resonant throb of pipe organs, but they were playing harmonies that were subtly, sickeningly wrong notes that shouldn't exist, chords that felt like oral vertigo. I reached the landing before the great door. From this new, terrifying vantage, the world was sideways. The forest floor was a vertical wall to my left, the sky a yawning chasm to my right. My stomach lurched, and I had to clutch the rotting handrail to keep from vomiting. This, I would learn, was only the beginning of the disorientation. The great door was unlocked. It swung inward without a sound, revealing the nave, and I beheld the true, insane glory of the tilted cathedral. The congregation of the askew. The interior was vast, a cavern of twisted geometry. The floor upon which I stood was, in fact, the interior of the south wall. Pews were bolted to this wall, stretching away from me in perfect, parallel rows, filled with a congregation of perhaps 200 souls. They sat upright, their feet planted firmly on the polished stone wall, their hymnals resting on their laps, as if this were the most natural orientation in the world. Above them, the vast, vaulted ceiling was now a vertical cliff face to my right, adorned with hanging censers that swung slowly, emitting not sweet incense, but a thick, cloying scent of myrrh and decay. To my left, where the north wall should have been,
To our journey in the
was the
bonds
true
we forged.
floor of the
May our
cathedral,
path be lit by fire
a
and
dizzying
friendship.
drop of 100
To our
feet
journey in the
into
bonds we
shadows
forged.
that seethed
May our path
and
be lit by
whispered.
fire and friendship.
And in the center of it all, where the transept crossed, was the pulpit. It was here that I saw the priests. There were 3 of them, clad in vestments of black and blood red. They did not stand in the pulpit, they walked upon it. The pulpit was a freestanding stone structure, now oriented with its side as its base, jutting out over the abyss of the true floor. The priests moved across its vertical surface with the effortless grace of flies on a ceiling. Their feet made no sound on the stone. Their robes hung down, perfectly perpendicular to the surface. They walked on, defying the gravity that was pulling me toward the left-hand abyss. One of them was in the midst of a sermon. His voice was a sonorous, hypnotic baritone that wove seamlessly into the groaning music. And we are reminded, brothers and sisters, he intoned, his arms spread wide as he walked a slow, deliberate circle on the vertical pulpit, that doubt is not a sin. Doubt is the testing of the foundation, but a foundation built upon the bedrock of faith cannot be shaken. It is only when we chip away at that bedrock, when we question the very mortar that binds us to the divine, that we find ourselves adrift. As he spoke the word adrift, his eyes, like chips of flint, scanned the congregation. They settled for a moment on a young man in the third pew who was fidgeting, his knuckles white as he gripped the pew in front of him. The priest's smile was a thin, cruel slit. "Do you feel it, my son? The tremble in your soul? The little voice that whispers, 'This is impossible'?" The young man looked up, his face pale with terror. I try, Father Malachi. I try to believe." "Trying is not believing," Father Malachi replied, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that nonetheless carried through the entire nave. "Faith is not an effort. It is a state of being. It is the acceptance of the miracle. To try is to already entertain the possibility of failure. And here, failure has consequences." He took a step towards the edge of the pulpit, an edge that from my perspective was a sheer drop. He placed one foot out into open space, and he stood there, poised over the 100-foot drop, perfectly balanced on nothing at all. A collective, shuddering sigh went through the congregation. It was a sound of awe and terror. I, however, felt only a cold, scientific revulsion. This was a trick. It had to be. Hidden wires, magnets, some form of localized anti-gravity field generated by the strange stone. My skepticism was a shield, and I clutched it tightly. I took a step forward, intending to find a seat in the rearmost pew. But my body, trained by a lifetime of earthbound existence, rebelled. My inner ear screamed. My muscles, expecting to fall towards the left wall abyss, tensed for a fall that didn't come. I stumbled, lurching against the pew. The sound was loud and clumsy in the sacred space. Every head in the congregation turned to look at me. 200 pairs of eyes, wide and unnervingly calm, fixed upon the newcomer, the outsider, the man who could not walk straight. Father Malachi, still standing on nothing, smiled directly at me. "Ah," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "A seeker, welcome. Find a place and let the certainty of the stone steady your soul." I managed to slump into a pew at the very back, my heart hammering against my ribs. I was drenched in a cold sweat. This was no trick. The disorientation was too profound, too visceral. I could feel a force, a pull tugging at me from the left, from the true floor. It was a physical temptation, a siren call to plummet. To resist, it required a constant, low-level act of will. I had to believe that the wall beneath my feet was the floor. The moment my concentration wavered, the tugging grew stronger, and a wave of vertigo would wash over me. This was the horror Thorn had hinted at. Gravity was not a constant here. It was a negotiation, and my faith in science was losing the argument. IV, the choir of the falling man. The service continued. The congregation sang a hymn, their voices rising in a discordant harmony that matched the oppressive music. The words were in some archaic tongue, but the meaning was clear enough, a celebration of stasis, of defiance, of being the rock that would not be moved. I focused on my breathing, on the solid feel of the wooden pew beneath me. It is the floor, I repeated to myself like a mantra. This is down. That is not down. This is down. It was during the second hymn that it happened. The young man Father Malachi had addressed earlier, the fidgeting one, began to lose his battle. I saw it in the increasing desperation of his grip, in the way his eyes darted towards the abyss, in the sheen of sweat on his forehead. He was doubting. He was fighting it, but the doubt was a cancer, eating away at his conviction. His singing faltered. He closed his eyes, his lips moving in a silent prayer. Father Malachi watched him, a look of profound pity on his face. "Let go, Brother Caleb," he said, his voice soft but carrying. "The struggle itself is a form of doubt. Surrender to the certainty of faith." But Brother Caleb couldn't. His doubt was a feedback loop. The more he felt himself slipping, the more he doubted his ability to hold on, and the more he doubted, the more he slipped. His feet left the wall. It was not a sudden, violent fall. It was a slow, graceful tilting. He peeled away from the pew, his body rotating in the air as if he were a leaf detaching from a branch. For a moment, he hung there, suspended between the two gravities, the faith-based gravity of the wall and the absolute, unforgiving gravity of the true floor. A sound escaped his lips, not a scream, but a whimper of ultimate understanding. Then the true gravity took him. He fell sideways. His body accelerated horizontally across the vast open space of the nave. A human projectile launched towards the far wall, the true floor. The music swelled, the cellos taking on a shrieking, ecstatic quality, as if this were the crescendo of the piece. The stained glass windows seemed to weep faster, the colors blurring into a kaleidoscope of anguish. The impact was not a wet crunch. It was a deep, resonant thud, like a great bell being struck once, mournfully. It was the sound of absolute finality. The music did not stop. The priests did not pause. The congregation did not cry out. They simply watched, their faces a mixture of sorrow and grim affirmation. This was the liturgy. This was the lesson. The falling man was as much a part of the service as the hymns or the sermon. His body lay broken 100 feet below, a dark, small shape against the stone. As I stared, horrified, I saw shapes detach themselves from the deeper shadows, small, twisted things that might have been rats or something else entirely. They scurried towards the body and began to drag it away into the darkness. Father Malachi looked down at the spot where the young man had vanished. And so, a soul who could not find purchase on the rock of faith finds his rest in the gravity of the world, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. Let his fall be a reminder to us all. Amen. The congregation echoed the Amen, their voices unified, serene. I sat there, frozen, My scientific detachment had shattered. This was not an architectural anomaly to be studied. It was a slaughterhouse of the soul. The tilted cathedral wasn't just a building. It was a predatory entity that fed on doubt, and it had just been fed. The sacristy of whispers. After the service, the congregation filed out with a quiet, orderly grace, descending the scaffolding with a confidence I found utterly baffling. I remained in my pew, too shaken to move. The vast space was now empty save for the 3 priests who had descended from the pulpit and were now walking across the true ceiling-turned wall towards a small, arched doorway I hadn't noticed before. Father Malachi paused and looked back at me. "You are welcome to stay, seeker. The cathedral offers sanctuary to all, for a time." His invitation felt like a threat. But my curiosity, that cursed, gnawing hunger that had driven me here, was not yet sated. I had to understand. I had to know the mechanism. I stood, forcing my legs to obey, and followed them. Walking was an agony of concentration. Each step was a conscious rejection of reality. I had to visualize my feet glued to the stone, to believe with every fiber of my being that this vertical surface was my horizontal plane. The pull from the left was a constant, physical ache in my gut. I reached the arched doorway and stepped through into a smaller chamber, the sacristy. Here, the disorientation was, if possible, even more profound. The room was a cube, but its functional orientation was at a 45-degree angle to the nave. A table was bolted to what I perceived as the floor, but chalices and liturgical objects sat upon it, perfectly upright, their own personal gravity seemingly independent of the room. It was a space of multiple, competing realities. The 2 other priests were removing their vestments, hanging them on hooks that protruded from a wall that was, to me, the ceiling. They ignored me. Father Malachi stood by a basin of water, washing his hands. "You are a man of learning," he said, not looking at me. It wasn't a question. "I am an architect," I replied, my voice hoarse. "I study buildings." He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "And what have you learned of this one?" "It's impossible," I said, the words bursting from me. "The stress forces the foundation it shouldn't stand. And the gravity, it's a localized field, a manipulation of quantum states." Or, I trailed off. He was looking at me now, his eyes boring into mine, and my words sounded feeble and childish. The prattling of an infant trying to explain the sun. "You speak of forces and fields," he said, drying his hands on a black cloth. "We speak of faith. You see a contradiction in stone. We see a manifestation of divine will. The cathedral stands because it has faith in its own right to stand. It is the ultimate act of belief, and it extends that privilege to those within it." "That man, Brother Caleb," I stammered. "He fell." "He did," Father Malachi agreed calmly. "His faith was a leaky vessel. It could not hold back the ocean of truth. Gravity is the truth, Dr. Finch, the default state of a fallen world. Faith is the miracle that allows us
The
to
signs
rise
are
above
clear.
it,
The ritual must be
or,
performed tonight.
in our case, to walk beside it.
The signs are
gestured
clear.
to the room
The ritual
around
must
us.
be performed tonight.
This place is a lens. It focuses the soul. What you believe in here becomes manifestly, physically true. If you believe the wall is your floor, it is. If you believe you can walk on air, you can. But the moment a crack forms, the moment you wonder, the world rushes back in. And the world is a heavy, crushing thing. He took a step towards me. I flinched, expecting him to walk on air again. But he didn't. He stayed on his own perceived floor, though it was a sharp angle to mine. Why are you here, Dr. Finch? He asked softly. You do not seek God. You seek a puzzle. You seek to dismantle the miracle and lay out its gears and springs for your colleagues to cluck over. You are the most dangerous kind of person in this place. You are a man of pure, unadulterated doubt. I just want to understand, I whispered. Understanding is the death of wonder, he said, and the death of faith. Stay the night. Attend matins at midnight. See the cathedral in its full glory. Perhaps you will find what you are looking for, or perhaps it will find you. He turned and left through another door, leaving me alone in the crooked sacristy. The silence was absolute, broken only by the slow, rhythmic drip, drip, drip of what I hoped was water from the basin. But when I looked, the basin was dry. The whispers began then, not from any visible source, but from the very stones. Faint, sibilant voices, just at the edge of hearing. They were not speaking any language I knew, but their intent was clear. They were questioning. They were doubting. Is this real? Can this be? What holds the roof up? What if I jump? They were the voices of every soul who had ever entered this place and felt their certainty erode. They were the anti-chorus, the background radiation of disbelief that permeated the stone. And now they were in my head. VI matins, the midnight gravity. I did not leave. The mad cartographer's promise had been fulfilled. I believed. I believed this place was a danger to my mind and my soul, but I could not turn away. It was the ultimate professional challenge, the black hole of my career, and I was being drawn past the event horizon. I found a small, isolated side chapel, a place where the tilt was less severe, and tried to rest. Sleep was impossible. The Gothic music never ceased, only changed its themes, becoming slower, more melancholic, more predatory. The dripping windows cast long, weeping shadows that moved in the non-existent breeze. And the whispers were a constant, psychic itch. I thought of my life, of my unwavering belief in empirical evidence, in the scientific method. Here, that belief was a liability. It was the very thing that would kill me. To survive, I had to believe in the impossible. I had to accept magic. It was a theological torture designed specifically for the modern mind. As midnight approached, I heard movement. The congregation was returning. Their faces, illuminated by flickering candlelight, were grim, expectant. This was not the main service. This was something darker, more primal. I joined the stream of people as they flowed back into the nave. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The music had changed. The organs were silent. Now, it was only the deep, groaning cellos and a single, reedy flute that played a melody of profound loneliness and despair. The congregation did not take their pews. They gathered on the great wall floor, standing in a loose crowd, facing the pulpit. The 3 priests were there, but they were not walking. They stood in a line, their heads bowed. The only light came from the weeping, stained glass, which now glowed with a sickly internal luminescence, and from a single black candle that Father Malachi held. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice a low rumble. "We gather in the deepest dark, when the sun has abandoned the world and the weight of silence is heaviest. This is the hour when faith is tested. This is the hour when the whispers are loudest." As if on cue, the stone whispers grew in volume, forming a susurrating counterpoint to his speech. "It's a trick, you're all mad. There is no God, only the fall. Tonight," Father Malachi continued, "we will reaffirm our belief, not with words, but with action. We will show the darkness that we are not afraid." He raised the black candle. "Who among you feels the tug of the void? Who hears the voice of the abyss calling their name? Step forward, face your doubt, and transcend it." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, a woman stepped out of the crowd. She was middle-aged, her face a mask of serene determination. "I am Sister Beatrice," she said. "I hear the whispers. They tell me I am a fool. They tell me my faith is a crutch for the weak." "And what do you say?" Father Malachi asked. "I say they are lies," she replied, her voice gaining strength. "I believe in the miracle. I believe in the stone." She turned away from the pulpit and walked towards the edge. The edge where the wall floor met the terrifying abyss of the true floor. The congregation held its breath. The music held a single, dissonant note. Sister Beatrice did not pause. She stepped on the edge, and she did not fall. She took another step, and then another, walking calmly out into the middle of the vast, empty space. She was walking on air, 100 feet above the hard stone below. Her face was turned upwards, enraptured. She was a perfect picture of faith. A wave of relieved, joyous murmuring passed through the congregation. Father Malachi smiled, but I was watching her feet, and I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible tremor. A flicker of hesitation in her 6th step. It was enough. The absolute certainty on her face fractured into a microsecond of surprise. Did I just slip? The thought was a ghost in her eyes, but in the tilted cathedral, a ghost is all it takes. Her foot plunged downwards 6 inches. She gasped. The congregation gasped with her. She fought it. I could see the battle on her face. She was trying to reclaim her belief, to force the air to become solid again. For a moment, it worked. She stabilized, hovering in mid-step, but the the seed of doubt had been planted. It sprouted, vines of fear choking her faith. I'm going to fall. I'm not strong enough. I'm a fraud. The thought became reality. Her faith broke like a snapped cable. She dropped. It wasn't the slow, graceful tilt of Brother Caleb. This was a violent, sudden surrender to true gravity. She fell like a stone, a short, brutal plummet to the true floor below. The impact was a wet, final crack that echoed in the silent nave. The music resumed, the flute taking up a lonely, wandering tune, as if nothing had happened. Father Malachi looked down, his face sorrowful. "She almost had it," he said, his voice laden with genuine regret. Her faith was so strong, but almost is not enough. Not here, not ever. He turned his gaze to the congregation, and then, slowly, to me. "The line is razor thin," he said, his eyes locking with mine. "And on either side, there is only the fall." That was when I felt it. A subtle shift, a change in the pressure in the room, in the pull on my own body. The terror of what I had just witnessed, the sheer, brutal physics of it, had opened a fissure in my own carefully constructed mental fortress. I no longer had to concentrate to feel the wall as the floor. It just was. I had accepted the reality of this place, not through faith, but through terror. I had seen the consequences of disbelief, and my mind, in its desperate drive for self-preservation, had capitulated. I was standing firmly, naturally, on a vertical surface. I had passed some unspoken test. I was no longer a visitor. I was part of the congregation, and the realization filled me with the deepest dread I have ever known. VII, the descent into certainty. I have been in the tilted cathedral for what I estimate to be 7 months. Time has lost its meaning. The perpetual twilight of the northern reach and the unchanging, candlelit gloom of the interior have merged into a single, eternal moment. My watch stopped on the first day. The hands simply froze, as if time itself could not bear to move forward in this place. My transformation is complete. I no longer see the world outside as right side up. When I look out the great door, it is the forest that is tilted, a mad, vertical landscape defying all reason. Here, in these stones, I found a terrible, unshakable certainty. I can walk the walls. I can traverse the ceiling of the nave, looking down at the new arrivals as they stumble and clutch at the pews, their faces masks of terror and disbelief. I feel a pang of pity for them, quickly followed by a surge of contempt. Their doubt is so loud, so messy. I have had conversations with Father Malachi. He is my confessor now, and I am his most fascinating penitent. I have told him of the world outside, of skyscrapers and airplanes, of quantum mechanics and the theory of relativity. He listens with a kind of bemused sadness. "You built your own cathedrals of doubt," he said one evening as we walked along the underside of the choir loft. "You erected spires of steel and glass that reach for a heaven you swear does not exist." You fly through the air in metal tubes, believing in the science of lift and thrust, but never once believing in the miracle of flight itself. Your entire world is a monument to a faith you refuse to acknowledge. How exhausting. I had no rebuttal. He was right. My faith in science was as blind, as unproven in its ultimate foundations, as his faith in God. The only difference was the object of worship. Here, the object of worship was tangible. It was the stone, the tilt, the ever-present threat of the fall. It was a faith that demanded daily, hourly proof. It was a faith that killed the unfaithful. I have seen dozens fall. Men, women, even a child who could not comprehend the paradox. Each fall is a lesson. Each impact is a hymn. The music has become my comfort. The dripping windows are my art. The whispers are now a familiar chorus, a white noise I can easily tune out. My research has continued, but its nature has changed. I am no longer trying to disprove the cathedral. I am trying to document its glory. I write in this journal, using the last of my ink to bear witness. My cameras were the first thing to go. I smashed them on the true floor. Their mechanical, unblinking eyes were an insult to the living miracle around me. I have explored the lower levels, the ossuaries and crypts that lie in the darkness of the true floor. They are not empty. The things that dragged away Brother Caleb's body live there. They are not rats. They are collectors, pale, silent figures who move through the absolute gravity with a fluid ease. They are the ultimate faithful, those so utterly convinced of the fall that they have become its custodians. They do not speak. They only collect the fallen and add them to the great, shifting mounds of bones that line the subterranean passages. I believe they are what remains of those whose faith became so absolute it transcended their own flesh, leaving behind only a single, focused purpose: to serve the gravity they once feared. I am running out of paper. I am running out of self. Yesterday, I tried to leave. I walked to the great door and looked out at the vertical forest. I felt the pull, not the pull of the true floor, but the pull of my old life, my old reality. It was a weak, pathetic thing, like the memory of a forgotten song. I took a step onto the scaffolding, and I froze. A wave of pure, undiluted terror washed over me. The forest was wrong. The sky was in the wrong place. The world was tilted, unstable, blasphemous. To step out, there would be to deny everything I now knew to be true. It would be the ultimate act of doubt. And I knew, with a certainty that was more solid than any stone, that if I took that step, I would not fall into the forest. I would fall up, into the sky, forever. I stumbled back inside, sobbing with relief as the cathedral's familiar, sideways gravity embraced me once more. I cannot leave. The cathedral has not trapped me. It has saved me. It has given me the one thing my old world never could: an absolute, unquestionable truth. This will be my final entry. I am bundling this journal along with my wallet, my broken watch, and a lock of hair I cut with a shard of stone into a crate. I will give it to one of the collectors. They know the ways in and out, the secret paths that do not require faith, only surrender. Perhaps it will reach the outside world. Do not come for me. There is nothing to save. The man who entered the tilted cathedral is gone. He fell a long time ago. I have found my faith. It is a terrible, silent, and motionless thing, and I will never, ever doubt again. Dr. Alastair Finch. The Tilted Cathedral. The Last Day